Zeroing your rifle or pistol can be intimidating if you don't have a process or system to start from. If you look online, it doesn't always help or get much clearer. This is because the video you watch might be talking about a separate optic than the one you have, or the creator might not explain exactly why their process works. Now, while I can't explain the nuances of how to zero every single optic out there, what I can do is I can share my personal process and offer my top 5 tips that have been the most helpful to me when zeroing, regardless of the optic or firearm. Before we start, as always, my name is Kenneth Miller, and I'm glad to have you either back or viewing our channel for the very first time. I want to take a quick moment to thank all of you watching. We recently surpassed the 10,000 subscriber mark on this channel. This is a great accomplishment, not necessarily because of me, but because of all of you guys. Every one of you who are actually watching our videos and shorts and trusting us with your subscription. I don't want to drag on about it, but I am incredibly grateful for the support, and I can assure you that I'm going to continue to try to put out the best educational and entertaining videos that I can the rest of this year and into the next. All right, so for tip number 1 for zero success, is to make sure that you have your optic mounted correctly. If your optic or sighting system is incorrectly mounted, I don't want you to be surprised that when you have your groups moving from one spot to another spot without you actually making any adjustments. I know it sounds wildly simple, but it truly is one of the first things that we all can get lazy with. The remedy and causation for this could be a variety of things. You may need to add Loctite to your mounting screws, or you might have tightened the mount too much or too little. What I suggest is referencing what your specific optic calls for before going to the range. For tip number 2, I would say pick one type or load of ammunition to zero with. This is not to be confused with caliber. It is imperative that you shoot only the caliber specified on your firearm. But for most calibers, if you aren't aware, there are a multitude of brands and different loads available that have unique characteristics, which translates to different impacts. Changing or mixing your ammo during the zeroing process is a surefire way to add frustration and degrade your confidence with your zero. For your carry handgun, my recommendation would be to zero with your duty rounds or whatever ammo you carry for defensive uses. For most pistol training, the range ammo that you're going to use will not have a significant enough shift to cause issues during training, but we definitely want to make sure that we're not missing shots when it comes to defensive use cases. Now, for rifles, I would offer the same advice. However, I'll add that if you have a suppressor, it's a good idea to do a group with and without it and just check to see if there's a significant shift or not. With a high quality suppressor, you're probably not going to see much of a shift, so I wouldn't worry about that. Moving on to tip number 3, I highly recommend shooting from a supported position. I think it helps to probably think of each shot like it's the most important one, and in order to do this, you need to be comfortable. Now, if you're shooting prone, that means laying down, make sure that you are straight behind the gun instead of having your body and legs off to one side. That's something that you may have seen in movies, but it's not an ideal position. The best thing you can do in order to have consistent groups is keep your legs and feet down and get comfortable enough while you're in that prone position not to have any muscular input on the gun besides when you're pulling the trigger. Shooting from a bench can be a great way to zero your rifles or handguns, but just like with the prone position, you need to ensure that you're not adding undue muscular input into the rifle or pistol while shooting. Now there's a caveat here, this is sort of a tip 3.1, but use a bag. Whether or not it's manufactured or rigged, a bag can make a huge difference with how relaxed you are behind your long gun or just to rest your pistol on. I have found that my favorite position for zeroing a handgun has been to use a bag as a way to support the heels of my hands and the very bottom of the gun. All I do is I just hold on enough to be able to pull the trigger and maintain control enough that my gun doesn't go out of my hands. Another really unique way to achieve a good pistol zero is something that I saw Don Mahilio, aka Milspec Mojo, showcase in a recent YouTube video of his. What Don did to build a durable and consistent position for his handgun was to lock the light rail of his handgun into a tripod and then bring that to the exact same height as he would normally be shooting from when standing. I think this is ingenious and a great solution, although I would caution you to remain aware of your muscles fatiguing even just from the weight of holding your own arms. Otherwise, I think this is a tremendous idea. All right, now for tip number 4, start close. Whether you are experienced or not, I think one of the biggest ways that we tend to frustrate ourselves is when we put a sight on our gun and then we immediately go out to our zero distance. Have you ever gone to zero your gun and you set up your target and you shoot your first group only to walk down to the target and you don't see a single hole? Okay, well, maybe it's just me, but I would be surprised. One way to avoid this mishap is to shoot a group up close. Let's say just anything under 15 yards. This will allow you to get an idea of if your sights are starting way off to the sides or above your aiming point. Keep in mind that if you have a sight that is taller than your barrel, you will want to have the rounds impact below where you are aiming up close. I recommend focusing on getting the rounds lined up on the left to right axis for starters, and then at a minimum making sure that your rounds aren't going higher than your point of aim on the close target. After this, you can go ahead and move your target back to your desired distance, confident that you'll at least have impacts on paper, and then you can make finer adjustments from there. All right, last but not least is tip number 5, aim small, miss small.
What did I tell you fellas about shooting?
Aim small, miss small.
Aim small, miss small.
The biggest piece of advice I can give is not to necessarily take extra time shooting, but to more accurately aim. I suggest picking the smallest aiming point that you can see and to be as precise with your aiming system as you can. With a red dot, this means I'm dimming it down as much as I can before my eyes have to strain to see it. With iron sights, I recommend picking a particular reference point on the front sight blade that you can consistently line up. And then lastly, if you have an S reticle or scope, this is going to be a lot easier, but the same still applies. Be very, very calculated with each shot. All right, these are the highlights of ensuring that you get a good zero, but before I wrap up, I have just a few bonus tips. Bonus tip number 1, don't shoot a ton. Learning to shoot groups takes time, and you're gonna get a lot better at this the longer you shoot. So try not to get overwhelmed if your groups are not as tight as you anticipate or would like. Just take the average group size and the average group location and make adjustments from there. Just remember, the longer you're shooting, the hotter your barrel is getting, and you're less likely to get an accurate zero, so just be conservative. Bonus tip number 2 is dry fire. Something that I do that has definitely tightened my groups when zeroing is to do 3 to 5 dry fire repetitions exactly how I'm gonna shoot when zeroing. This helps me a ton when checking my position to see if I will get fatigued during the process. All right, bonus tip number 3, make one adjustment at a time and bring a notebook. This one just makes me laugh, but I would suggest making one adjustment at a time, either on your elevation or on your windage. Either way, if you want to try to do both at the same time, by all means, go for it, but write down the adjustments that you need to make, because I can promise you this, it's very easy to forget all of that when you have to think of how many clicks equate to however many inches at whatever distance. All right, that's all I got for today. If you're looking for more specific information on how to make these adjustments in order to zero a scope or what distance to choose, head on over to our blog, and I'm gonna have a step-by-step process that you can follow along with that should get you going down the right path. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.